Now we'll be having DTM Abdul Rahim. This Toastmaster has accomplished a podium finish in all four districts and is famed for his workshops. Apart from Toastmasters, he is a CA and an MBA associated as Chief Knowledge Officer of IPE Global. He is the founder of NGO TSSF, which is doing significant work for COVID relief and Amphan cyclone in Bengal. He acknowledges Toastmaster DTM Kunal for starting up the movement of Toastmaster in Kolkata, DTM Archita for her regular prodding, infectious energy, and evergreen smile, and DTM Naveen for his quick thinking, enigmatic expression as human humor. I welcome DTM Abdul Rahim, who will be giving an inspirational keynote speech.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much, Madam MC, and all the officials of this TLI for Division QKI. Wonderful to share some of my thoughts and experiences at the TLI session number 2.
Sorry to interrupt. The audio is breaking and the video is a little unclear. Could you just check once?
Is it better? Sure, maybe.
Not much.
His network
Is it better now?
bandwidth is low.
Yeah, the network bandwidth is low. I mean, if you'd like to take a minute or so to.
Is it better now? I've just changed the network.
Yeah. The audio is better. Yeah.
Okay. The year was 1456. The emperor had just died, and a young 14-year-old lad was being put up as the king on a throne. He hardly knew the meaning of king, kingdom, or even the responsibilities of kingship. But there he was, sitting on the throne, all decked up, and all the officials and courtiers acknowledging him as king. Sort of Lion King-ish, isn't it? But this was in reality. This was the young king who later became Akbar the Great. At the age of 14, Akbar didn't have a choice whether he had to be a king, whether he had to lead, or whether he could say no to this responsibility. Bayram Khan, his father's trusted aide, decided that he should be made coronated immediately, and he would carry out all the orders in the name of that king. Later, of course, Akbar realized his potential, his responsibilities, and enhanced his skills to become an effective leader that is remembered as one of the greatest in the history of India and remembered today as Akbar the Great. Akbar didn't have a choice in becoming a leader. Do you? I'm sure a lot of us here would say, yes, we did. We have acknowledged and taken up these roles consciously, whether as a club executive officer, whether as an area or division officer, or even a district officer. But many of you here who may be ordinary Toastmasters may say, well, I haven't. I've chosen not to take a leadership role. I'm here to tell you that's not true. To lead or not to lead is not the choice you make. The only choice you make is how to lead. Intrigued? Let's go forward and ask ourselves. All of us live in various circles where we have our right to influence. Some of us here may be students, and we have our friend circle where we have a right to make an opinion. We have a right to give our view. We have a right to change people's opinion. Some of us may be educators, teachers, teaching to a large student group. If not, some of us would be married couples where we have at least two people, one of which we have a right to influence. Some of us may be here as parents, and there we have an even greater responsibility of bringing up a child, and therefore we have that responsibility to influence. There are thousands of books on leadership across the world, but the most simple, most effective, and most memorable definition of leadership is also the shortest, 7 words in all. And that's by John Maxwell. John Maxwell defines leadership in a very, very simple way. He says, leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. Leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. This to me summarizes the universal applicability of leadership. And when we make a choice of becoming a leader here, we understand and take that same meaning to be able to make a difference to the people whom we shall work with over here. I'm here to talk about some of the major things we should think about, not only in Toastmasters as a leader, but in our lives whenever and wherever we are exercising influence, which in the words of John Maxwell is leadership. As every role, we have a responsibility to take up this responsibility of influence, and we must be aware of the various principles. Let me first start by defining and differentiating management and leadership. A lot of us are defined, a lot of us are confused, and a lot of us presume one to be the other. If we look at the etymology, the origin of both these words, you'll find that management comes from the origin of the word manus, which means to do. Whereas leadership comes from another word, the meaning of which is to go. Leadership, management is about doing things. Leadership is about taking people to places. The biggest and most effective example for this is parenting. I'm sure some of us here would be parents. I'm a parent too, of 2 children. And I've seen this responsibility grow, evolve over time. The ability to influence a child is so important as a leader. That's the leadership role. Ask any parent of a teenager and they'll tell you that's the most difficult job in the world. I still remember when I was responsible. Of course, parenting is a joint responsibility of the mother and the father. But then the father's role always becomes a sort of side role with the mother taking center stage. I still remember my wife asking me one day when I was sitting and having and reading my newspaper, sipping coffee in the world's best dad cup gifted by my children. She said, well, you know, next Monday, the driver's not going to be coming, so you've got to go and pick up our children. I looked up from the newspaper and said, sure, why not? Sipping my next cup of coffee, I said, which school do they go to? Management and leadership, the difference is not about doing, but about taking responsibility for where they are going. At another level, if you were to look at this circle of influence that I'm talking about, is also about outside, but the first circle of influence is within us. Have you heard of the Eisenhower theory of management? Let me share with you. Dwight Eisenhower, one of the presidents of United States of America, was at the stage when the Second World War was about to get over. And a lot of people were telling, well, we'll put in our people from this side and ask them to go from here and there. He picked up a string quite like this, put it on the table, and he says, push it in any direction. The people tried, but wherever they would push it, it would come back towards itself. And then he says, the only way you can move a string across a table is to pull it, not push it. I again look at that as the Eisenhower theory, string theory of leadership. Whenever you as a parent want to make an impact on your child, the single and most important person you have to influence is yourself. That self-leadership is in fact the ultimate leadership that any one of us can apply. D. Hawk, who's been a leadership writer and who's written about leadership for 20 years, he's a laureate in the US Business Hall of Fame. He shares his wisdom. He says, we should invest 50% of our leadership amperage in self-leadership and the balance 50% into leading down, leading up, and leading laterally. Imagine that. As a parent, you are the biggest example to your child. As a leader, you are the biggest example to your entire team. I learned this in several other places. As a speaker, you hold the key to energy in the room. As a leader, you hold the key to leadership effectiveness in the team. Your team is never going to be more energetic, more enthusiastic, and more effective than you can be as a leader. Leadership is like parenting. It starts with self. Self-leadership is the core of that. I want to mention that Daniel Goleman, the author of Emotional Intelligence, talks about it, and he says, exceptional leaders distinguish themselves because of superior self-leadership. This starts with an awareness of yourself. It starts with an enthusiasm to try to make a difference in yourself. I've had the opportunity and good fortune of working with a number of leaders in my professional life, in Toastmasters, in my social life, and in my family. And each one of them has given me opportunities to reflect and change my ways. I remember as a young adult, I was very angry. I used to be responsive, immediately responding to things with anger and even shouting at times. And then I remember I looked at people who get things done by people who want them to do it that way. One of them is the managing director of a large consulting company. We were going on a corporate retreat by train, about 100 people, and the entire organization was there at the platform, getting into the train and sitting into the seats that were being shown at the train in the tickets. When suddenly some people came and said, "Hey, you are sitting on my seat." They said, "Go and talk to HR." HR came and said, "Look, here are our tickets. These are our seats." And the persons who were claiming looked at the ticket and said, "Hey, your ticket is for the next month, same date." Imagine this, 100 people scheduled to go for a visit from Delhi onwards were put off the train because their tickets were wrongly booked by the HR. The managing director of the company is standing at the platform, 100 people with their luggages expecting that retreat are standing as the train moves out of the platform. And I said, the HR head has lost his job. You know what the MD did? He said, "Well, we are where we are. Let's work out alternative way to reach our destination as fast as possible. Let's have 3 different teams, one to take care of alternate transport. Let's arrange buses and move from here." We were going to Karnal. Another team, let's look at breakfast options. The third team, please take care of luggage as we move out and do these things. Within, I think, an hour, everything was arranged and we were on our way, arriving only a couple of hours later than what we would by train. That was the first time I saw leadership. If I was in that place, I would have perhaps got angry. I would have shouted. If I had the power, I would have sacked that person, saying, "You've put us all at a tremendous embarrassment." But then I learned that day that effective management, effective leadership is not about exploiting your power and authority, but about making things work out and also maintaining the relationships. Talking of relationships, you know what? In a car, there are so many parts that are part of the engine, and every part interacts with each other. But none of those parts can you unless they have the energy that comes from the fuel, petrol or diesel. You know that fuel in an organization, in a team, that fuel is the fluidity of relationships. That is what makes the difference in the organization. There's Max Dupree, a great author on leadership and a CEO of a large company. He writes over there. He says, understand this, that leadership is more tribal than scientific. It is more about the weaving of relationships than about the amassing of. I want to quote that again. Leadership is more about the weaving of relationships than about the amassing of information. You may learn the tools of leadership. You may have all the parts in place, but unless you have the energy behind them to be able to operate them, unless you have the lubrication to be able to make them work effortlessly, you're going nowhere like that car. Start working on relationships. Our leadership responsibility is not transactional. It is relationship based. It's like a parent. A parent doesn't work in a transactional mold with a child. A parent works with the best interest of the child at hand and takes all actions necessary to make sure the child progresses. That same feeling has to have. And that cannot come until we start working from the heart. I want to ask each one of you to not look at any person you deal with in any opportunity of influence or leadership as people, as designations, as structures, as hierarchies, but to look at them as relations, as relationships. The best relationship you have, the better relationship you have, the stronger relationship you have, the better you will be as a leader. We have to understand that, as Greenleaf, the celebrated author on servant leadership, said, that after all, the ultimate objective of leadership is to serve your people. And that service cannot happen until we work from the heart. Anthony D'Souza, who's again an author and a celebrated author on leadership, has paraphrased and written it very beautifully. He says, even though I understand all the techniques of leadership, but have no heart, I am only repeating words. Even if you have memorized every theory of organizational development, yet have no heart, my heart knows that my inner person does not understand. Although I may have the highest academic background, without heart, I shall fail with other people. And he says, effective leadership does not point to popularity, fame, and money as proof of success, but asks, am I setting the right example? I want to also mention a similar word related to leadership, and that's charisma. A lot of us think that leaders are born because they have charisma. You know, one of the origins of the word charisma is character. The character is what defines charisma. And once you have that within you, and that cannot come by, as I mentioned, self-leadership. You've got to start working on that, and through that only develop the charisma and the leadership quality that you can lead a team with. There's a common saying you must have heard: a pack of wolves led by a lion is more powerful than a pack of lions led by a wolf. Imagine why. Your team, your organization, your friend circle, your family, you yourself are never going to be better than the example you are going to set. And I think that is the core of what we need to work out. So from today, let us start looking at leadership differently. I'll recall, as an area governor at that time, that title sounded so grand, so grand. I remember I was fortunate enough to be an area governor under the current international president of Toastmasters, Deepak Menon. We had our training, the equivalent of our TLI, in Bangalore at that time. I remember landing in and moving to the room. The session had just started and there were some people sitting. As I walked into the room, the then district director, Deepak Menon, looked up and he says, I welcome area so-and-so area director, Abdul Rahim. I welcome division so-and-so division director, so-and-so, and so-and-so. And I was so amazed. Everybody that was coming into the room was acknowledged not only by name, but by designation, by division, by district, by club, everything. And how could he do that? How? Because he felt very strongly about people. He took people's relationships strongly and made it a part of his effort to make it realistic for them. I want to encourage all of us to really start looking at that. The next district governor we had, district director now called, was Nagaraj. Again, he's no longer with our district, but he again was somebody who would remember even the smallest detail that was told to him. I remember meeting him up after a couple of years at another event, and he would ask me the most intricate details about what I had spoken to him maybe 4 years ago. How's that going? How's your child? How old is he now? What's he doing? You mentioned he's very interested in Lego. Is he working towards that direction now? In leadership, in relations, the small things are the big things. So I want us all to take this message and work on it as we work today in the TLI, that the real purpose of leadership is building relationships. The real purpose of leadership is to develop our own qualities and become a self-example for the rest of the world, for the rest of the team. And our role would be not to give up or not take on leadership roles, but in whatever leadership role we have, to play this role to our utmost capacity. Think of yourself as a loving parent. Think of yourself as the head of the team responsible for the team to win. Think of yourself as the responsibility that each one of them has given to you. And finally, what happens if you don't succeed? It doesn't matter. What matters is you tried your best. Remember, you have targets and goals. Toastmasters has targets and goals. You've got to achieve this. You've got to achieve these targets. Achieving goals is a small achievement. The real target should be to move to achieve your potential and help the rest of the team achieve their potential. If you go back to the example of Akbar that I started with, you'll realize he started up with hardly anything. But the learning that he had, it's almost like trial and error. You are entitled to that. And that's the best way to learn. But you must be aware and open to learning. And based on that, he wrote his names in golden letters in history. I hope all of you will too. But if you don't, remember this. Remember this small poem. It said, "At God's footstool to confess, a poor soul knelt and bowed his head. I failed, he cried. The master said, thou didst thy best. And that, my dear, is success." I wish you all the best. I wish TLI 2 all the best. And I hope all of us here come out enriched and living the spirit of Toastmasters International, the place where leaders are made. Thank you so much. And back to you, Master of Ceremonies.